I don't even know where to start with that game. AG tried to kill a man. Jamal dunked to tie it. Joker at 41-15-15 and was like a side note post game. The Nuggets get a monster win on Christmas Day. This is Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Network. Thanks for making us your first listen each and every day. We appreciate it, and appreciate you guys joining us across all platforms, including YouTube, where you can join the show and join folks like Irvin and Tommy and John and Spo and John Steichen, who also said that bingo card Matt takes a sip up from a Red Bull. I don't have one this morning, so joke's on you. Hurricane, Marjan, Carlos, lots of folks hanging out with us in the chat. You can do that if you sign up over at the old YouTube page for Locked On Nuggets. My name's Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network, coming to you from my bedroom instead of my office because one of my relatives locked the door to my office and then closed it, so I can't get into it. And I have to pick the lock later, so that's fun. Joining me is Adam Mares from DNVR, pre- and post-game shows over at DNVR before every Nuggets game, as well as all sorts of great content, including the list. Adam Mares, how was your Christmas? How you doing after a big Nuggets win?
My Christmas was great, punctuated by that game, which was just an all-timer.
A phenomenal game. Like, just a phenomenal game. And there's a lot to get into. We were trying to parse through all of the different moments. Like, it took us a solid 7 minutes of conversation before we remembered that AG threw back an alley-oop where he had to reach back behind his head and completely to catch the ball and then crack it. You commented on that on Twitter. Jamal Murray had a driving dunk to tie the game after a intense comeback. Jamal Murray we have so much we got to get to. The first segment, we're going to talk about Aaron Gordon, that dunk, and Nikola Jokic. The second segment, we're going to talk about
which one, Matt. Honest to God, he had 7 dunks in this game, and 4 of them would have been the best dunk of 80-90% of the league. That's how incredible his dunks were in this game.
Yeah, it really was. We'll talk about Jamal Murray and his clutch play awakening in the fourth quarter to help bring the Nuggets back, as well as his clutch play down the stretch. Clutch plays by Bruce Brown and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, all of that. As well as kind of an interesting subtext to the game in terms of how basketball in the NBA works, in terms of the flow of the game when certain players that you're expecting to play aren't there. We'll talk about all that and more on today's show. Third segment, we'll talk a little bit about the bench and some of the issues that were there that required the comeback. But let's start, obviously, at the top. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope causes a deflection. There's a loose ball. Aaron Gordon gets it. He's going down the right sideline. Jamal Murray says, I didn't think he was going to dunk it because it was a 3-on-2. He was like, I had the wing and Joker was in the middle. And with where he was, I was like, there's no way for him to get there and dunk it. AG said, I'm going. And he's like, I'm running with Joker. He's like, so I know they have to pay attention to Joker. He's like, I know that they have to keep him in mind, and that's going to create an opening for me. And so when I took off, I knew that Shamet wasn't there. Nikola Jokic was asked what he saw of that play, and deadpanned, I was open. It was my favorite.
By the way, we always think when Jokic deadpans, we think he's joking and giving a great delivery. He is, but he's also not. He was open, probably the easier play. But guess what? Sometimes the wrong play leads to the better highlight. That's exactly what happened here. And that's part of what made last night an all-timer. I mean, that dunk really was – I'm not going to say it's an all-time in-game dunk because there's so many great in-game dunks. Dr. J on the wing, Tom Chambers. So it's not like in that level, but it's up there with as good of a dunk as you're going to see this year, as good of a poster, especially when you factor in the context of it being a Christmas Day game and it being what wasn't technically a clincher, but effectively hey, Denver's probability just went from 55% up to 95%.
I asked AG if it was a 50.
I know,
and
that's a good question.
He laughed and said, maybe a 49, man.
Yeah.
He did say that was probably, it was probably the best in-game dunk of his career. He's like, because of time and score.
He flew.
The key though is, like, we've talked about that play because I think it was worthy of discussion. Again, I just continue to marvel at how much Aaron Gordon is giving this season.
Oh.
He's giving his effort. He's locked in mentally. He's giving his mental focus. He's giving emotionally. He's giving physically. He's so physical on the inside. I just do not have words for how good Aaron Gordon has been.
He's been the most consistent, I think, player all year, and that he hasn't really had bad quarters or bad games. Shots haven't fallen or this or that, but the effort is always there. The level of being locked in has always been there. So for me, he's just been so steady. And it's funny because we learn more about when you cover a team through the arc of very first draft, very first players in, trying to get over the hump, whatever, you kind of learn different things about them and what works. And KCP is a very steady player to me. Aaron Gordon is an extremely steady player. Bruce Brown, I think, is actually a pretty steady player. He has a little bit more variance and volatility than those other guys. But those three guys are so steady, and I honestly think it makes Jokic shine more. And I said this, I think, the other day on the show, that you want your role players to be steady so that your stars win it or lose it for you. Because I have faith that Jokic and Murray are going to win a lot of games for you, even in the playoffs. And that's what Aaron Gordon and KCP in particular provide. But we're talking Aaron Gordon, and he's just so steady and so reliable.
I'm not necessarily even interested in the All-Star conversation that much. I feel about All-Star the way I think you feel about MVP. And I think it matters objectively less from a number of perspectives because there's no real discernment on trying to be accurate with it. There's a bunch of different definitions. I'll just say this. Aaron Gordon has played at an All-Star level this season. Aaron Gordon has been an All-Star for the Denver Nuggets this season, and he deserves recognition for what he's given.
There's guy that probably on this, because I'm with you mostly on these accolades, because you end up just splitting hairs and it becomes the death of joy. The one thing I will say is Andrew Wiggins getting it last year, I like, because I've always liked this idea of great role players are better than bad stars, but the All-Star game, oftentimes you get a bunch of bad stars in there. Aaron Gordon, again, I don't know if he deserves it or not. I don't want to get into that. I'd have to go through the list and say who doesn't. Like, you can always say a guy deserves it, but you got to go through and say who doesn't deserve it in order to do that. And I haven't done that yet. But I will say, I'll take an AG over bad superstars any day. And he's having an elite role player season. So how do you quantify that compared to a guy having a good all-star season that's not effective? I don't know. But I do like the idea of rewarding guys when it's like, no, they're making winning plays.
Another guy that probably deserves a little bit of mention, I don't know, had an okay night, was Nikola Jokic, who finishes last night with 41, 15, and 15. And the MVP, I think, conversation for him started about 2 weeks ago. And it ramped up and it ramped up and it ramped up. And now I think it's going to be in full force for over the next, this is going to be a big talking point going into the new year. Is going to be like a lot of people saying, and Richard Jefferson said this, which was like, he was MVP last year and he's just as good, if not better. You had an interesting point that you think this is the best play of Nikola's career. It's funny because you and I think have done the show of, is this the best that Joker's ever played? I think 12 times in the last 2 seasons. And we're like, well, surely he can't play better. And then he does.
I'm telling you, man, it's the craziest thing is, I've been saying this for a while, but the stats don't always tell the story with Yoke in ways both good and bad. I mean, last night, 41, 15, and 15 tells a good story. But I just mean on the season, like he's averaging 25, down from the last 2 seasons. More dominant scorer, though, than the previous 2 seasons. I really believe that. More dominant. The assists are obviously up, but he just seems more in control than ever. And more than anything, he seems less bothered than ever. It wasn't long ago, Matt, that we were talking about DeAndre Ayton being a good matchup for Jokic. Like, oh, he gives him problems with the length and this or that. And even his own teammates have said as much. Who was it a couple years back that's like, I think it was Monte, who's like, yeah, Ayton, he's got guys like Ayton have the length and stuff to like bother him or this or that. Jokic is not bothered by Ayton anymore. He really isn't.
When he hit that Samba shuffle first quarter, that's when I was like, uh-oh. Like, and you're absolutely right. And for years I was it actually gives Jokic a little bit of trouble. And I don't do that anymore because I'm just like, look, you can do whatever you want. It doesn't matter. It
I
just
honestly
doesn't
think he
matter.
figures everyone out.
Yes.
Like you weren't wrong that guys would give him trouble, but it's just that then he plays them again and gets a little better. And then 2-3 times later, it's like, oh yeah, he solved that. He solved
And this
that
is
equation.
this is such a key point, and I don't want to turn it into like a condemnation of another player. But like a big sticking point with me with Embiid is that he still hasn't been able to solve double teams. Like
Right.
good double team play still forces turnovers versus Joel Embiid.
But
there has not been proven to be Jokic adapts to whatever it is that is in front of him.
But this is the difference, though, Matt, to me between IQ and Phil. And Jokic has both. But to me, like, you can train someone how to read the double team, but basketball has a million variables to it. Every double team is slightly different. Yes, there are the similar reads to it, but everything's different. And that's the difference between I know what I'm supposed to do and I just feel what I'm supposed to do. And I think that's why a player like Jokic, you can't teach everyone just how to be like, oh, I'm sensing this is exactly how to do this pass or how to get out of this moment.
Do you know what my favorite thing from Joker's night was? It was a quote from him post-game. I think it was Singer. No, it was Vinny. Vinny Benedetto of the Gazette asked, what'd you see on Jamal's game-tying dunk? And Joker said, that wasn't the play. And he said, but this is the really great part, is he said, that's what I love about playing on this team, though. He said, all of our guys know how to make the read, and we can adapt to the situation, and we can make the play that needs to be made. And it was so insightful into how he views it and what he wants to see out of his guys. And it's why, honestly, like, that's a very good encapsulation of like an area where I was wrong years ago, where I would advocate for like 3-and-D guys only. If you have a guy that just like knows how to do his job and only that job, Joker is going to be a little frustrated with him at times because Joker wants to play with guys that understand not just if A then B, if C then D.
But that's what, first of all, hold on. I don't like how you're phrasing that because that's what that is. That wasn't if A then B. That was we're running this play. But if they overplay in this way or open up the paint in this way, then B, which is go attack it. Just take advantage of it.
That's fair. I'm more just meaning that like having guys that know how to make those decisions, and it's a decision tree, right? And he likes playing with guys that understand the decision tree. And Jamal had a really great quote about him, which was, he was like, look, scoring makes me happy, right? He's like, that's my game. I'm a scorer. And he's like, the thing you gotta understand about Nikola is that passing really does make him happy. And it was, I will say this, these kind of quotes from them last night were illustrative of how that game it did mean something for them, which is really great to see. They got a huge win on Christmas versus a team that knocked them out 2 years ago. There's like a lot of questions about like, is there lingering tension over this? And you could tell that they were just like, we're a different team. They're a different team. There's not really a thing there. But I do think that they're just like, the Nuggets are they seem much happier. And it's like, well, yeah, they're winning. No, they were winning before. This was more of like, they realize what they're capable of and they're excited about that.
I think this whole last week has been a little bit of that. Just a little. I mean, we've waited. It took all the way till right the week before Christmas, but we've been talking about the Nuggets are the 1 seed, but it doesn't feel right. It's felt right the last week. It's felt right, and that's exciting to see.
Let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk about clutch defense as well as clutch Jamal. We'll do all that when we come back on Locked On Nuggets. First, I need to tell you about BetOnline. BetOnline.net's your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. I went 3-2 on Christmas Day bets, and I hedged both of them. So here's what I did, Adam. I had Suns +4. Thank you, Bruce Brown, for not dunking that basketball. And I had Suns money line because I was like, the turnovers are going to be a problem. Big key in this game, by the way, Nuggets had fewer turnovers than their opponent at the end of the game. I talked about that on the preview pod on Saturday night on Christmas Eve. And in the first half, they were losing, had more turnovers and points off turnovers. They turned it around second half. The Nuggets, when Jokic was coming back in, were +320 live line. And I was like, wait, this is a single digit game and the best player in the basketball game and arguably in the league is coming back into the game. So I took the +320, which not only negated my money line bet, but actually profited. And I got the spread play, phenomenal day of betting for me on the NBA. Was so excited. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season, basketball in the World Cup. They've got it all at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can find those at online as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us, making this part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us on a Monday. Hope your holidays were good if you celebrated. And if you just had yourself a nice weekend, hope it was quiet since everything was probably closed for you. All right. So, what do you do for food the day after Christmas? What do you do?
Leftover.
So I made roast. I made Dutch oven pot roast, which it's amazing. I braise it in wine. It's incredible. Cooked an entire meal for a family of 8 and then went to the game because I'm a superhero. However, I don't even want leftovers. I think I'm going to do like Chinese tonight. That's what I want. So I really want Chinese takeout. That's what I feel like doing. All right. So let's talk about clutch. Okay. So I asked this to Malone post game. The Phoenix Suns had 115 points at the 2:30 mark of the fourth quarter. They finished the game with 125. That's 7 minutes and 30 seconds of play. And the Phoenix Suns scored 10 points across that 7 minutes and 30 seconds of play. That's good for an 89 defensive rating over the final 7 minutes and 30 seconds of play. They are a phenomenal clutch defensive team. They are, I think, statistically the best clutch defensive team in the league. What did you see from them down the stretch defensively? And then we'll talk a little bit about Jamal.
I want to go back because this is the number one thing I need to go back and kind of look at. It felt like the team was just more aggressive. I mean, they were giving up that mid-range pick and roll over and over again. And it felt like the Nuggets weren't conceding that. They were taking it away. But I'm going to have to go back and see. More than anything, though, it just looks like Denver does lock in and has another level. I don't think they have that level for 48 minutes, and I think it's the reason they play the way they do. But it's nice to see consistently this year, and especially over the last week when they've needed it, they've had that gear to go to.
I asked Malone how I was trying very hard to get him out of his standard line of, if we do this for the entire game, if we do this for 48 minutes, and I was like, I know you want it outside of the last 5. I get that. And I was like, but what makes you good in the clutch? Because not every team is good defensively in the clutch. And I'll say, like, statistically, there's going to be a lot of indicators that some of it's random. Like, there's how it's going to be. However, I think when you watch how they play, there is a noticeable uptick in terms of energy. Jamal talked about last night, just fourth quarter, about like we kind of have a sense of when we need to turn it on. And I don't know that they had that early in the season. I think that they've learned that with each other. And they've kind of gotten the like, all right, it's go time. KCP was phenomenal. I just thought KCP made so many winning plays in the fourth quarter. Like Jamal was the one that hit all the big shots, and Aaron had the dunk, and Jokic had the production.
Everything.
Yeah. All of the things. But I thought that KCP made a bunch of really winning plays in that game. The deflection that caused, that set up Aaron Gordon for the dunk, the charge that he took off of the screen where he anticipated contact and sold it. KCP just made a bunch of big plays in that game. And I think I've been most impressed with KCP's clutch time defense of anybody, but that's also because I think I've been most impressed with KCP's defense over the course of the entire game as well.
Yeah, and I see some people in the chat have made this comment. Come on, guys, look how many points you gave up to the Suns without them having Booker. Here's the thing. That was the 5th best three-point shooting game of the season for the Suns. Landry Shamet played 39 minutes, made 7 3-pointers. He's not playing that if Booker's out there. So, yes, this is true. There is context to all of this. They were down 2 guys, both of whom are good shooters. But guess what? Damian Lee went 4 of 5. Landry Shamet went 7 of 17 and played 39 minutes. Neither of those things would happen if their regular players are in there. So then you're just asking, so I don't think this is if Booker comes in, you just add that on top of everything that happened there.
Go ahead. I have a really strong piece of like reporting and analysis piece to kind of add on to this. Do you want to finish? Sorry, I mean,
that was it.
So Ryan Blackburn, who's very good at his job, was asking questions about this post game about Booker and kind of what happened. And was there a letdown, right? And it was interesting because both Jamal and AG said the same thing, which I thought was really interesting. And they said it wasn't that there was an energy letdown. We didn't think oh, Devin Booker's not out there, whatever. Because Jamal was like, honestly, I don't even know. He's like, when you're out there, you're just playing against, you see who it is based off of what you know, and you play that way. You're just playing basketball. You're not thinking about where's Devin? He's like, I'm not thinking about where's Devin. And what AG said, which was really interesting, was that AG was like, the game plan changes for both of us. He's like, we had a game plan to focus on Devin because Devin Booker is their best player and is such a great scorer. He's like, but Devin's ball dominant. He's like, that's not bad. That's just how he plays. He's like, so when Devin goes out, they start moving the ball around and they're drive, kick, drive. And Malone said this too. It's drive, kick, drive, kick, drive, kick, which is entirely different from a lot of the way that they play when Devin has the ball.
Right.
And what this really kind of shows you, and somebody had kind of commented on this in earlier in the chat, was Marjan was like, well, this is on coaching because they didn't adjust. And it's like, look, the thing that the dirty secret here is that NBA players, especially if you're the starters, here's what you're looking at. You're looking at the first page of the scouting report because guess what? You're playing the guys in the first page of the scouting report.
Right.
Why would you flip to page 2? You're not going to be matched up with page 2 except for a couple of minutes.
Also, the page 2 scouting report is usually one line, run them off. It's not all the little details.
Right. So here's what's really fascinating. And Dave King, who covers the Suns, was pushing back when I said this might have been the Nuggets' best win of the season, which was said right after because it felt like such a big game. And in retrospect, I'm kind of I don't know, the Memphis win was so dominant. That's probably, there have been others. And he's like, but we were without Booker and Cam. And
I love, by the way, I just love Suns fans being on the other side of this now. It's
yeah, well, and then they're like, well, you wanted credit when you were without Jamal, so why don't we get it? And it turns into this both sides pointing back at each other thing. My big thing is I'm more interested in the fact of how basketball in the NBA works, and that when you throw such a huge component and that part is removed, what that team evolves into in that specific matchup becomes entirely different and can have the kind of success that Landry Shamet and Damian Lee had. Damian Lee, by the way, shooting 48%. When the Nuggets were leaving Damian Lee open, I was like, no one read the scouting report. I was like, no one has looked at the Damian Lee scouting report because I've watched enough Suns game to be he's liquid fire this year. He's shooting 48% from 3.
Well, honestly, the pick and roll defense though was part of why he was so open. Is and that's why the early part of this game was you felt so bad if you're Denver because you're they're just getting carved up in the pick and roll again. Can they not stop it? But of course, in the fourth quarter, that stopped. So again. How heavily you weigh that? If you're a Nuggets detractor, you look at quarters 2 and 3 and say that's the real Nuggets. If you're a Nuggets believer, you look at quarters 1 and 4 and say that's the real Nuggets. So, I mean, I don't know which one's right. We probably won't for a while.
Let's talk about Jamal, who I thought was having a terrible, no good game. I thought his intensity level was good, but just couldn't hit a shot. And that's, a problem, again, when you're a scorer. But then the fourth quarter, he found it, man. This was a couple of games now, Murray flurries, and Jamal plays 9 minutes, 44 seconds of the fourth quarter. And he goes 5 of 10 from the field for 14 points and just clutch shot after clutch shot, including the dunk. Bridges got him on that last inbounds play, which if we had more time in the press conferences, I would ask questions about did you guys have a play drawn up? All these type of things about it, but there's just not time. It does kind of show you, I think, Jamal, a lot of Jamal's career, and it's reflected this season through the injury stuff, I think, as well, is that you can get caught up in, if you look at the aggregate, sometimes you're kind of boy, I don't know. If you look at the smaller moments, you're kind of see, this kind of bothered me, or this was bad, or this wasn't good. He wasn't good here. And then there's these moments where you're just boy, I want that guy. You want that guy on your team. And I felt like that was kind of the case last night in the fourth quarter.
I mean, yes, the one thing my perspective on it is when Murray is good, the Nuggets are a true contender and honestly close to I don't want to say favorite, but they're in the same tier as any other team. Celtics, whatever, Bucks, whatever. They're in that same tier. The problem is Murray is just throughout his entire career just so inconsistently good. He goes to levels, even in this game, fourth quarter and overtime, great. He's unbelievable. That Jokic-Murray two-man game gives you a belief that they can't be stopped. The question for the Nuggets this season, twofold. One, can he get to that level more consistently than he ever has in his life. True superstars play consistent. That's the difference between really good players and superstars. Is superstars just they have a floor that's really, really high. Jamal has a floor that's lower than most players of his ceiling, of the tier of his ceiling. And then number two, will he reach that level when it matters most? So if he's consistent, you're much more likely to believe he's going to reach that level in the playoffs for 4 rounds all the way through. But if not, then at least you have the hope that Jamal Murray will go bubble version where he's just that best version of himself in the games that matter most. But when he's at that level, Matt, I mean, Jokic is always good. When he has a running partner like that, they score every time and then they get stops. That starting lineup for the Denver Nuggets, now with 2 games with Michael Porter back, has actually gotten better on offense and defense in the 2 games that they played together. They were a plus 17. They're up to a plus 20 because they've gotten better on offense and defense.
We're going to talk about the bench in the final segment, so I don't know if we're going to get another chance at this. I have a lot of respect for MPJ and what he did last night, because Chris Paul, who is, by the way, not the same dude that he was, unfortunately, it breaks my heart as a Chris Paul guy, not the same dude that he has been. You saw that, and somebody commented on that in the comments too about some of the misses.
But I'm not counting him out in the playoffs. Like, he of all players, it would be smart for him to not be peaking right now. He's definitely like LeBron James. LeBron's not the player he used to be. Will he be if they make the playoffs and he just needs to be that for, a week or a series? Like that Chris Paul might do that as well.
I thought MPJ's work on those screens was really good. Joker actually interesting after the game. You know this. Like, Joker almost never has any sort of like criticism for a teammate. One of the things he said was he was trying to be positive. It was that what he was trying to say was he's like, I think Michael's been so good. He's like, if he can just not get hung up on screens, then guys aren't going to be able to hunt him at all. Like, guys are not going to be able to attack him. Like, he's been really good, and his ability to get over that screen and block that Chris Paul jumper, like, that's huge. Like, all you have to do is when a team says we're going to target you, if you shut him down a few times. Right?
Chris Paul ended up like throwing it away or throwing it to a teammate, but it wasn't a block. But it would have been a block.
Sorry, I was on the other side of the court, so I couldn't really see it. It looked like I didn't know if it was blocked or if it was a throwaway. But he bothered Chris Paul, right?
Correct.
And so, if he could just do that a few times, that shuts down team's confidence in this is what we want. Like, you want to, if a team's like, we're going to pick you out, and then you step up, then that team's like, all right, we got to go do something else, right? And you've just taken one more option away from them. And I thought, honestly, he was really good. I thought it was really good there. I want to ask you about,
because you can't really work on defense, but I do feel like it would be worthwhile for him to just run navigation drills. Like, in a summer, you just have to go around 5 screens and recover and get balanced again, because Denver's championship hopes might come to it. You're right. He is really bad chasing guys around the perimeter like that. But when he does it well, Denver defends well.
So Jamal made the shots. Do you think it was a mistake not to get Joker involved from a process standpoint in those final few possessions of the fourth?
I mean, there was like a play or two where I felt like there was a better option out there, but I'm not going to complain about it. Like, there were the one that I think people are most mad about is the last one where they get the switch, DeAndre Ayton switches out onto him, and then he throws up a prayer. Yoke, sometimes in those moments, especially when he gets a point guard on him, he wants Jamal to shoot because he'll go rebound it. And the rebound just didn't come his direction, and it was kind of a bad shot. But to me, I actually wasn't frustrated. Murray did force it, but guess what? Murray had that look in his eye in that fourth quarter, and I'll take that every time.
You do have to trust your teammates, I think. I think that's important if they have the ability.
I thought Murray was a little selfish early in the game, but late, man, like, you run again. If you come down and wave Jokic off and just try to cook, I don't think that's a good process. But a lot of this was screen and roll, switch, and then are you going to Jokic or are you going to the perimeter? And they went to the perimeter. He made a bunch of them. He missed a couple, but I'm okay with that process. My biggest note is, as great as the Murray-Jokic two-man game has been, Murray does not have any shake to him right now. He has great footwork, and he has great two-man game, but like, he had Ayton on an island. When he's at his top form, that's Steven Adams falling down on the perimeter. Like, Murray just gets so quick. He doesn't have that to him quite yet, and that's what gives me hope that this two-man game has a whole other level to him.
Let's take a break. We'll come back and we'll talk about the bench and the struggles there, as well as kind of wrap up our discussion from the Suns game. We'll do that when we come back on Locked On Nuggets. But first, I need to tell you about a message from the NHTSA. You're hanging out with some friends and putting back a few drinks. A few becomes a few too many. And as the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think of calling for a ride. Nah, you live nearby. You can make it home okay. It's no big deal. What are the odds that you'll get pulled over anyways? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up, or you lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill someone. Everyone knows about the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. A message from the NHTSA. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets, thanks for making us your first listen. Make sure your second listen is Locked On Sports Today. From the biggest games to the stories that matter most, you can find all the stories that only Locked On can provide at Locked On Sports Today, wherever you get podcasts.
Okay. Before we get to Bones, Matt, I just want to talk. Christian Braun had some great defense the other day, including one of the best possessions I've ever seen on Chris Paul for a rookie. Just like Chris Paul gave him like 8 pump fakes that are veteran players fall for all the time. And somehow Christian Braun just stayed with it the whole time and didn't fall for any of them. I thought he did a good job in his limited role in that game.
Yeah, he was really good. Zeke Naji, like you said, you were right. Zeke Naji was really great defensively in that game.
His perimeter defense is like his strength, man. Like Zeke Naji, here's one thing I'll say about him. You can overvalue, I think, some of the stuff he provides as a big, but I think you can undervalue the stuff he provides as a perimeter defender. Like he gets switched out onto guys, and he's better than most guards at just moving his feet and contesting.
And the lineups that he was going against, they didn't have a real way to punish, right? Like they tried going to Biz a few times, and it worked. I think it worked early and then started to fade on the switch, right? But that's the thing is, like in those kind of lineups, if you have a lockdown switch defender and he's going to be a lockdown switch defender, that's going to take away a lot of what teams want to do defensively or offensively. Like just if you're able to switch with your bench unit, not a lot of teams can, and that causes real issues for the opponent. All right, so Bones Hyland. Yeah. 1 of 6 from the field, a -13, 0 of 5 from 3, 1 assist to 2 turnovers. Picked up, was it 2 or 3 fouls in the fourth to get him in the bonus at 9:20. I will continue to say the things that I have said, which is I am going to point out Bones being one of the most significant issues, if not the most significant issue on the bench. That does not mean that I don't think that he should play, because I think he should. The key is that you have to find ways to get Bones to be better. Yeah. And maybe right now, a lot of that is Bones being overly worried that if he makes a mistake, he's too tight, right? That he's worried about getting pulled. I don't know that going the other way and being like, no, don't worry about it, just do you, is a right approach either, because he's been so sloppy. There's got to be like a middle ground there. I will notice this. He guns when Jamal's not on the court. He actually has started record scratching, which is you catch the ball and you have an opportunity to shoot a high percentage look and you rethink it. He's done that.
Murray, by the way, one of the dynamics is Bones will drive and kick, and if it's Murray, you've got to be a floor spacer there. You got to go up with it. Murray record scratches a lot as well, especially in this last game.
I agree. There was a possession I pointed out, I think in the Memphis game, where they both record scratched on a possession. That's why like a new problem that they're having is like early in the season, they were just generating bad shots or turnovers, and now they're just generating 24-second violations, which I will say is an improvement because it burns clock until Joker can get back in, but they still need to figure out a way to actually run stuff. I think the key here is just that Bones they're going to have to figure out something. What they need something where Bones feels super comfortable running. And like, for me, that's always going to be like pick and roll with a big that screens and provides space for you. But that didn't work this season either. It can't just be the ISO stuff, because it's just not something I think you can eat on. If you have it going, you can go to it, right? They're going to need to figure out something to get him going. Maybe that's relocation. I don't know if you can build that in season, but I don't know what it is.
First of all, yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I thought you were.
You're fine.
Up.
Go ahead.
Bones has been a negative in 15 of his last 17 games. That's a pretty staggering amount. Like 15 of 17 times he's been on the court, the Nuggets have lost the minutes. Now they won him big against Portland plus 19, and that's kind of the thing about Bones, right? When you win those minutes, you win big typically. And he's also shot below 50%, I think, in 9 of the last 10 from the field. So here's the thing with Bones. I do think that he's in his own head. Like the balance between you need to be aggressive and you need to play your game versus like doing other stuff has swung too far in the other direction. He is now playing his game too much. And I do think that for a player right now that's going through it, and almost every young player, especially guards, they go through stretches like this. This is not an uncommon thing for young guards, especially high variance ones. To me, it's about reducing what you do now. I think Bones has to go from Bones the scorer, which is not working at the moment, to Bones the facilitator that is focused on his defense, because the defense part has to get like much better immediately. That part, even if he starts making shots, has to improve. But to me, like, reduce the pressure you put on yourself to score a little bit. Try to just see what happens when you get other people involved and see if you can regain and reset doing those things. Because it feels like it's been 5 or 6 games in a row where he's been trying to shoot himself out of the slump, and it's just putting him further into one.
Yeah, I agree with that. And sometimes like all you can do is shoot out of it. Like you just have to wait, because I don't know that you can really I don't know that in season he's going to be able to improve defensively enough to the where you're going to feel good about it. I think a lot of it's going to have to come with time.
Some of this is just experience and focus, though. Like he got caught on a very good play design from Phoenix the other day I think it was in the fourth quarter, where they sent Shamet going one way off screens and then immediately boomerang him back to come back off of those screens. And like that is a read. Young players can learn that. They can, like, he fought through the first round and you could see he was kind of like, did it. And it's like, no, that was the setup. You didn't do it. You did the setup part, and now you got caught on the comeback. And those are things that if the will is there, a player can be in the tape and looking at it and go like, okay, all right, I'm learning this. I'm figuring some things out.
I think one of the things that I can't figure out is why, and Malone keeps going to it, in part because this is just like what the rotation looks like in terms of contract, salaries, role, etc. I can't figure out why Bruce Bones doesn't work. What do you think is it about that combination that just looks so bad, both in plus minus and eye test?
I mean, I can't tell you that. It starts with what right now defensively it's been atrocious. But if we just talk about why isn't it working offensively, again, I think there's a little bit of a spiraling out of control with Bones where he is playing the role of a Allen Iverson. And I think that he can be that guy. Like he can be a volume scorer off the bench that is looking to score at all times. Look, kill. Somebody asked him one time early, what are you thinking when you get the ball in your hands? And he says, kill. I'm thinking kill. He kind of needs to stop thinking kill for a second. Like you need to calibrate when am I thinking kill and when am I just trying to read the court, read the game, and get some other people involved in some way. And again, this is just part of the growth process. This is why the NBA is the toughest league in the world, is you can be insanely skilled as a one-on-one player, this or that, but you're going to go through moments where it's like, okay, what else can you go to in these moments that makes you a great player? That's not working. What else do you have in your bag? And that's why I think with Bones, this is a dark moment for him. I think there's no question that the bench is struggling right now, in large part because of him. If not, I don't want to say exclusively, because I always just don't think there's magic bullets to these types of things. But I do think that it's easy to say that he's the number one problem with the bench. But again, everybody goes through these moments, and the Nuggets are winning, by the way, through this stretch of his, that I hope that this is an opportunity for him to grow as a player and to come out the other side with something else to his game that he can now fall back on when he goes into little slumps.
Yeah, actually, it's funny. It's like you're like the Nuggets are winning anyway. Malone actually mentioned that a lot. He's like, isn't it good for him to be able to work through his problems? He's like that we're able to win, and so it's not costing us, and we don't have to, it's not putting all that pressure on him. He's like he's got to work through those issues and be able to be effective, and he needs a time to work through it. Malone, I will say this, like publicly, is very defensive of Bones. He's very defensive of Bones in a way that I wouldn't expect for, I guess, just in that situation and what the stakes are this season, right? Is that Malone continues to kind of be like, look, he's in a really tough spot. Like he's been in and out with injury or COVID. He doesn't have a lot like his confidence is low right now. He's trying to work through it. That bench doesn't have a lot of talent on it. Like
it also doesn't have a lot of consistency. Like they've tried a tiny lineup the last 2 games that's different from anything else that they've done. Like Again, I think you play different when Bruce Brown is your power forward than you do when Jeff Green is. You play different when Zeke's your center than you do with DeAndre. Like, there is a lot of evolution going on in that second unit. This is not an excuse. I'm just trying to tell you the different variables that he's facing right now. But it is telling to me, and I'm curious to see how much longer it lasts. Christian Brown gets yanked pretty quickly. Zeke Naji gets yanked pretty quickly. Bones was really bad in these last couple of games and has played regular rotation minutes. So Malone has stuck with him through the bad spells.
This is kind of transitioning. Walter says, I got roasted, maybe rightfully so, for calling Joker's PNR defense bad on DA and CP3. Would honestly like to learn what I'm reading or misreading. I wouldn't say that you're necessarily wrong. I think they played like there was a when CP3 went on the run to kind of push it up. A lot of it was like they were playing drop and he was getting to space. Like some of that's you just gotta live with it, right? Where like CP is such a god at that high pick and roll to the right side and just keep drifting until he gets to that baseline fadeaway. Like Chris he's literally been doing that for 15 years, night after night after night. And you saw like some guys couldn't even hang with him, and like Bruce Brown's like, I'm there, and it just doesn't matter, right? I think in terms of the coverage, it wasn't great. I'll also say this, like DeAndre Ayton, I looked this up, takes 2.6 jumpers per game. I don't have the number on what he took last night, but I think it was closer to 10.
Yeah,
their game plan to me was very much built on, or at least DA's interpretation of it. I don't know if it was Monty's. DA was like, I'm going to shoot. Like, I'm going to take these jumpers because Joker's going to give me space to shoot. And it worked, and then it didn't work, and then it worked, and then it didn't work. And it kind of went back and forth. And some of that, if that was his call and not Monty's, which I think you have to ask that question given the tension between those two guys, then like that's a really bad look for DA, because Monty's response would be like, why do you think they're giving this to you?
I honestly don't think that was it. I mean, to Walter's point, I thought the pick and roll defense was horrible last night until it wasn't. Yeah. Like it was horrible until the final 9 minutes, whatever you outlined, and then Denver ratcheted it up. So, yep. But there was a stretch, and this is the most discouraging thing about the game up until that point was I'm sitting there and I didn't tweet. I've learned most of my tweets in the middle of a game, like you have to let a whole game play out because then it'll change. Like you just have to give a whole arc. But if I were to have tweeted from the hip in that second and third quarter, I would have been like, Denver looks hopeless. Why would you ever have any faith in them? Because they're losing in the exact same way they lost to them in the playoffs 2 years ago, even with different guys. They're getting murdered in the pick and roll, and they look like they can't get any stops. But, of course, it was a different story when you got to the fourth quarter and the team was like, okay, let's go to our fourth quarter defense and lock in. So I think Denver was good when it mattered at exactly the caliber that they needed.
Okay. That wraps it up in the way that we can. We could spend 3 episodes on this game in its totality, but guess what? Tomorrow night, the Nuggets are back at it. They got 2 games set versus Sacramento Kings. Go ahead.
A little back-to-back. The one thing I'll say is we never talk about the big context. One thing here is that the Nuggets put themselves up 4 games in the loss column on Phoenix. So the game actually did have a little bit of just seeding importance too. It's too early to get too into the seeding, but 4 games in the loss column is a lot, at this stage of the season. So that was a big game of separating them. And by the way, Phoenix is now the 4 seed. So Denver, the 1 seed, sole possession of the 1 seed, but also with that cushion on the 4 just shows you that they're starting to build a little bit of separation. If they can keep this winning streak going, you could find yourself in a spot here where you're like, you know what? Statistically, Denver is very, very, very likely to host a playoff series in the first round.
I don't know if you know this, but if you beat a team in the majority of the matchups in the regular season, you get what's called a tiebreaker, and then if you tie them, then you get the higher seed. Someone very smart once told me that. So Nuggets go 1-0 on the Suns on the tiebreaker.
By the way, all right. Second best record in the entire NBA. Third best record in the entire NBA.
Yep, pretty good. All right. We'll see you guys tomorrow. We'll preview the Kings game. We'll talk more about where the Nuggets are at and where they're headed as the good times continue to roll here. We'll be with you for the good and the bad, as always. Thanks for joining us, as always. We'll see you guys again next time on Locked